My greedy sister hijacked our parents' estate and turned our lives upside down. I'm Tom, a 35-year-old software engineer living in San Francisco. My sister Sarah is 38 and works as a marketing director in New York City. Our parents, Richard and Margaret, were always meticulous about planning for the future, or so we thought. Dad passed away 5 years ago, and Mom followed just a year ago. That's when the nightmare began. Growing up, Sarah and I had a typical sibling relationship. We fought, made up, and moved on. But our bond was never the same after Dad died. He left behind a sizable estate, a sprawling house in the suburbs, a couple of investment properties, and a substantial amount of savings. Mom was the executor of the will, and everything seemed to be in order. However, when Mom passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack, it turned out that she hadn't updated her will in years. The document was a mess. It left everything to be divided equally between Sarah and me, but the details were vague. The language of the will was outdated, referencing assets that no longer existed and missing recent acquisitions. I wanted to settle things amicably, but Sarah had other ideas. She immediately hired a high-powered attorney and started pushing for a larger share of the estate, claiming she had been Mom's primary caregiver during her final months. While it's true she visited more often, I believe it was because she lived closer. I helped financially and took time off work to visit as often as I could. Sarah insisted she deserved more because of the time and effort she spent caring for Mom. She made it clear that she felt entitled to a bigger portion of the estate, highlighting her sacrifices and downplaying mine. Her lawyer was aggressive, demanding a 70-30 split in her favor, and argued that the financial gifts Mom had given Sarah were separate from the estate. The real kicker came when we discovered that Mom had made significant gifts to Sarah shortly before her death, a fact that Sarah conveniently neglected to mention. She had received over $100,000 to help buy her Manhattan apartment. I was furious. That money should have been part of the estate. The arguments between us became more heated. Sarah accused me of being greedy and unsympathetic, while I felt she was being manipulative and selfish. Our conversations turned into shouting matches, with Sarah often storming out in anger. At one point, she accused me of not caring about Mom at all, a low blow that hurt deeply. I had my own family to take care of and couldn't drop everything to be with Mom constantly. But that didn't mean I loved her any less. Our lawyers became our primary means of communication. Family gatherings were now awkward and tense. Our spouses, initially supportive, started feeling the strain of our ongoing feud. My wife, Emily, tried to mediate, but it only seemed to make things worse. Sarah's husband, Mark, kept his distance, possibly because he didn't want to get involved, or maybe he sided with her silently. One of the properties in question was our childhood home. It held so many memories, both good and bad. I wanted to keep it, maybe rent it out, and eventually pass it on to my kids. Sarah wanted to sell it immediately, seeing only the financial gain. The fight over this house became symbolic of our entire conflict, a tug-of-war over our shared past and diverging futures. Sarah's unreasonable demands escalated. She insisted on selling all the properties quickly, regardless of the market conditions, just to get her hands on the cash. She dismissed my suggestions to wait for better offers or to keep the properties as long-term investments. When I proposed renting out the childhood home to preserve it, Sarah scoffed, accusing me of being sentimental and impractical. She was relentless. She'd call me at odd hours, insisting on immediate decisions, threatening legal action if I didn't comply with her demands. Her lawyer sent numerous aggressive letters, each more demanding than the last. I felt constantly harassed, under siege by my own sister. My work suffered, and I became increasingly irritable at home. The stress of the ongoing battle was overwhelming. I started losing sleep, constantly replaying our arguments in my head, wondering how things had gone so wrong. My kids asked why they didn't see their aunt anymore, and I had no good answer. Emily suggested family therapy, But Sarah flatly refused, saying it was a waste of time. The final straw came when Sarah proposed selling the family heirlooms, jewelry, artwork, and furniture that had been passed down through generations. These items had immense sentimental value to me, but Sarah saw only dollar signs. She wanted to auction everything off, arguing that it was the quickest way to liquidate the assets. I was horrified. Those heirlooms were part of our heritage, and I couldn't believe she would so callously discard them. Despite my growing resentment, I tried reaching out to Sarah to suggest mediation, but she insisted that court was the only way to resolve our differences. The legal fees were piling up, and what should have been a straightforward process had turned into a protracted battle. I worried about the toll it was taking on our mental health and family relationships. Sarah's behavior grew increasingly erratic and vindictive. She started making decisions unilaterally without consulting me. She changed the locks on the childhood home and put up "for sale" signs without my consent. She even had movers come and pack up our parents' belongings, shipping some to her place and putting the rest in storage. I found out only when I visited the house to find it stripped bare. When I confronted Sarah, she dismissed my concerns, saying that she was taking charge since I wasn't doing anything productive. Her arrogance was infuriating. She seemed to relish the power she wielded, often making snide remarks about my perceived incompetence. She accused me of being too soft-hearted and nostalgic, while she prided herself on being practical and business-minded. Our legal battle intensified. Sarah's lawyer filed a motion to expedite the sale of all properties, arguing that I was obstructing the process. My lawyer countered with a motion to freeze all asset sales until a proper valuation could be done. The court hearings were grueling, each side presenting its case with increasing hostility. Sarah's lawyer painted me as an uncooperative obstacle, while mine tried to highlight Sarah's underhanded tactics and unreasonable demands. The court-appointed mediator tried to find common ground, but it seemed hopeless. Sarah refused to compromise on any point, insisting that her sacrifices for Mom justified her claims. She disregarded any evidence of my contributions and refused to acknowledge the unfairness of the financial gifts she received. The mediator's frustration was palpable, and I felt a sinking dread that this battle would drag on indefinitely. Meanwhile, the emotional toll on my family was profound. Emily and I argued more frequently, the stress of the situation seeping into every aspect of our lives. My children, sensing the tension, became withdrawn and anxious. They missed their Aunt Sarah and couldn't understand why we were fighting. It broke my heart to see how this inheritance battle was tearing us all apart. One evening, in a rare moment of calm, Emily and I sat down to talk. She expressed her concern about the impact this feud was having on our family and urged me to find a way to end it, even if it meant compromising more than I thought was fair. Her plea made me reconsider my stance. Maybe holding on to the estate wasn't worth the damage it was causing. I decided to propose a settlement to Sarah, hoping to appeal to whatever sense of family she had left. I offered to give her a larger share of the estate if she agreed to keep the family heirlooms and the childhood home. To my dismay, she rejected the offer outright, accusing me of trying to manipulate her. She demanded everything be sold and the proceeds split, as she originally wanted. Her refusal left me with little hope. It was clear that Sarah was more interested in winning than in finding a resolution that honored our parents' legacy. Her relentless pursuit of material gain at the expense of our family bond was heartbreaking. The court date loomed closer, and I prepared myself for the final showdown. I gathered all the evidence of my contributions and prepared my arguments. Despite the bleak outlook, I hoped that the judge would see through Sarah's tactics and grant a fair resolution. In the end, the judge ruled that the estate be split equally, with specific provisions to preserve the family heirlooms and childhood home as I had hoped. While it was a victory in legal terms, it felt hollow. The process had strained my relationship with Sarah to the breaking point, and I doubted we'd ever reconcile. After the ruling, I reached out to Sarah one last time, hoping to find a way to mend our relationship. She responded with a curt email, stating she had no interest in maintaining any contact with me. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I realized I had done everything I could. The inheritance, which should have been a blessing, had turned into a curse. The emotional and financial strain was overwhelming. I sometimes wondered if we'd ever be able to repair the damage or if this fight would permanently destroy our relationship. I never imagined that settling my parents' estate would lead to this. If only Mom and Dad had been clearer in their will, maybe things wouldn't have spiraled out of control. For now, I'm just hoping for an end to this nightmare, whatever that might look like, so we can all move on with our lives.